Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me. In today's video, we're going to be talking about crying sounds from an empty room. But before we get started, make sure to like this video for more videos just like it. Stick around for the end of the video, because I have a scary story for you that I guarantee will keep you up at night. So crying sounds from an empty room is a newfound phenomenon in the paranormal investigation community that has been recently making rounds on the internet. This particular incident was shared by paranormal investigators who were investigating a home when all of a sudden they heard a knock followed by what sounded like a woman crying in an empty room. While this event is certainly creepy and strange, there are some interesting points to take away from this overall situation. The first thing to note is that the door in question was not only closed, but locked from the outside. As you can see in the video, the investigator had to use his credit card to try to open the door because it was stuck shut. And even after he finally got the door open, the noise continued to be recorded. The fact that the door was locked from the other side would almost completely rule out any human interaction or even animal interference. Since if a person or even a pet could somehow manage to lock a door from the inside, while also continuing to cry and sob at the top of their lungs, then they would most likely be sectioned off in a mental institution rather than just wandering around freely. Another interesting point to consider here is that the team actually attempted to communicate with whatever was behind the door, but nothing responded to them. They asked, "Is anybody there?" as well as other questions, but no voice or sound answered them. So the entity, if there was one, was either unable to speak or was simply ignoring their presence. Either way, this goes further to rule out the possibility of a person or even a living animal being behind that door. If someone were hiding behind the door, it seems unlikely that they would purposefully choose to ignore those trying to speak with them, especially if they were crying and clearly distressed. All of these pieces of evidence point to one distinct conclusion, that the sound of a woman crying was coming from an empty room. But there are still some loose ends to tie up here. First of all, if a ghost was responsible for making this sound, why did it stop when the door was opened? Most ghosts tend to be transparent and can walk through solid objects without issue. And even if this particular ghost couldn't pass through the physical door itself, it could have icily phased around the edges and continued crying. Or maybe the ghost was simply startled by the sudden entrance and ran away. But this doesn't seem too likely considering that the ghost did and make any attempt to interact with the investigators in any way. The other possibility to consider is that perhaps the crying was coming from within the walls themselves. Perhaps the house had been built over top of an old burial ground, or there was a secret passageway that led to an underground tunnel system. In such a case, the crying could have been caused by a spirit that was trapped within the walls or beneath the house. However, this theory falls apart when we consider that the sound continued even after the investigators pried open the door and entered the room. So in the end, this case remains unsolved, and the mystery of crying sounds from an empty room continues to baffle scientists and ghost hunters alike. There are currently two other theories floating around out there. One claims that the sounds were made by the investigators' own imaginations. According to this theory, the investigators' expectations of hearing something paranormal caused them to hallucinate the entire event. While this may seem far-fetched, it is possible that the investigators were so focused on finding ghosts that they convinced themselves they had found one. The final theory is that the sounds were made by a form of unknown technology. Perhaps there was a device hidden in the room that was designed to mimic the sound of a crying woman. Or maybe the sounds were being broadcast over the radio or television. While this theory seems more plausible than the others, there is no evidence to support it. And ultimately it remains just a theory. In the end, crying sounds from an empty room remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of our time. We may never know for sure what caused these sounds, but one thing is certain. They will continue to baffle and intrigue us for years to come. Alright, now that we've covered a paranormal mystery that has yet to be solved, let us move on to a terrifying true story that will leave you questioning the nature of reality itself. Back in 2007, a young woman named Amanda Gorman moved into an old Victorian house in New Orleans with her boyfriend Mark and their two cats. From the moment they stepped foot inside, they could feel that the house was different, as if it were filled with a heavy sense of sadness and despair. At first, they ignored it, chalking it up to the age of the house and the many people who had lived there before them. But as time went on, the feeling only grew stronger and more oppressive. Then one night, as Amanda was getting ready for bed, she heard a loud crash in the kitchen, followed by what sounded like a woman screaming in pain. Amanda told Mark about the noise, but he simply dismissed it as her imagination. He told her that old houses creak and settle, and that it was probably nothing more than that. But the strange occurrences didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, Amanda and Mark began to experience strange phenomena on a regular basis. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects would move from one room to another, and they would hear strange whispers and footsteps in the dead of the night. At first they tried to rationalize these events away, but as they continued to happen, they began to grow more and more frightened. One night as Amanda was lying in bed trying to sleep, she heard the sound of someone walking up the stairs. She listened intently and then heard a knock on the door. She told Mark to listen, but when he did, he couldn't hear anything. Amanda described the knock as someone knocking the door 3 times, as if they were trying to get our attention. Each knock sounded louder than the last and seemed to echo throughout the house. As the days went by, the paranormal activity only escalated. Amanda and Mark began to feel a dark presence in the house with them at all times. It was as if there was a malevolent spirit that was watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then one night the unthinkable happened. Amanda and Mark were awoken in the middle of the night to the sound of their cats screaming in terror. When they looked over, they saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of their bed. Amanda and Mark screamed and tried to hide under the covers, but the creature didn't attack them. It simply stood there staring at them for what felt like an eternity. When Amanda and Mark finally gathered the courage to look again, the creature was gone. They got out of bed to search for it, but they couldn't find it anywhere. Amanda described the experience as pure terror, mixed with confusion. She said that she couldn't understand why the creature hadn't attacked them, but she was too scared to stay in the house any longer. Amanda and Mark packed up their things and left the house immediately. They never returned, and the house was sold. To this day, Amanda can still hear the echoes of the footsteps and whispers in her nightmares. And she will never forget the feeling of dread and terror that consumed her during her time in that house. Damned. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.